Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. I am so grateful you're here because you probably are craving growth, learning, evolution, and more self-awareness. You're probably craving more vulnerability in your life, deeper conversations, not the mundane, how's the weather conversations. That's why you're here. And that's what you're going to get on today's episode. You're going to get vulnerability because vulnerability is really my love language because that is what creates deep, sustainable connection. And so that's why I love doing this podcast because we can have vulnerable conversations. We can grow and evolve. We can get helpful tools to really heal. And I hope this conversation is helpful to you in your healing journey. If you want to grab the free journal, feel free to do that at kristendboyce.com/free resources. It's also linked in the show notes. Let me introduce you to today's guest. Amber Trejo is a licensed marriage and family therapist. You know I love my fellow marriage and family therapists. She owns a private practice where she specializes in complex trauma and attachment. She is also a wife and mom to 3 wild boys on her own journey to heal from complex trauma and break the cycle. We talk about her story, which she gets very vulnerable in this conversation. And I think that's what gives other people permission to also share their stories. She talks about how she got into doing her own work when it hit her, which is usually in a relationship, it's going to come up, or the birth of a child, or some significant life transition. There's going to be a mirror back to you of what has laid dormant in your body. Perhaps you've had signals and invitations to deal with it, but you kept busy, you pushed it down, you suppressed it. This is your sign to start the work, or if you're on the healing journey, continue, keep going. Your life will change for the better. It can be bumpy at times, but please know you're on the road to freedom. So here is my conversation with Amber, and I hope it is transformative on your path. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. This is going to be an episode that if you have gone through any kind of trauma in your life, you know I love to talk about trauma as a trauma therapist. This episode is for you. Amber, welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited for a fellow indie. You might be my first indie besides my team therapist that I've had on the podcast. So it's exciting. You're around the corner.
I know. I was so excited when your assistant reached out. And I was like, oh, she's local. That's so cool.
I know. I love this.
Yes.
So let's dive into all things trauma. I know we talk about it all the time. We live it. We've gone through our own work. Tell me a little bit about your childhood, what brought you to where you are today, so the audience can get to know you a little bit more.
Absolutely. There's so much to tell. Whenever I'm on a podcast and someone asks me that, I'm like, okay, let's think clip notes here. So what I usually tell people is that I just had a lot of traumatizing experiences as a child. I had a lot of adverse childhood experiences. So if your audience is familiar with ACEs, they're basically 10 experiences that if you have in childhood, there's all of this research that shows that it affects you in so many different ways. You're much more likely to fall into addiction. You're much more likely to become homeless. You're much more likely to just have struggles in your relationships. And so I didn't, of course, know what adverse childhood experiences were growing up. But as I got my degree and I started to learn about these experiences and the concept of complex trauma, basically just repeated experiences and exposure to traumatizing events in your life, I realized, wow, okay, this is what happened to me in my childhood. I had a parent who was an alcoholic. I had a father who was a predator and ended up abusing family members and left when I was very, very young. And I found out about his predatory behaviors very young. And then my mom struggled with her, and I specialize in CPTSD. I believe she struggled with CPTSD as well. She had all of these trauma responses and behaviors that made her very abusive to me growing up. So just a string of things where it was just my baseline for life was really unsafety. And especially relationships were super unsafe. That's like a little bit of my childhood. And then kind of coming out of that, I moved away from my trauma. I began being on my healing journey. Of course, I didn't call it that back then because it wasn't all about that, right? Back then, it was just kind of like I'm away from these experiences. And I felt really, really good in that piece of my healing. I was like, oh, I'm moving forward. I'm healed. I'm great. I did a lot of spiritual bypassing during that time. And then once I got in my first serious relationship, which was my husband, all of these trauma responses started coming out. And I, of course, had no language for them because I hadn't gone to college for psychology yet. I hadn't gotten my degrees. I had no idea about what was happening for me because there was no language for it back then either. That was probably like 2011, 2012 was when we got married. And then continued to see these trauma responses happen, what I know now to be disorganized attachment. And very much how I had acted in all of my relationships. But it was even worse as I fell in love and became really serious with my husband. And then once we got married, then continued to see these trauma responses come up in my parenting. After I had my first child, I was like, what is happening? And ended up going back to school for psychology as an adult. I was 29. I was pregnant with my oldest and started to learn so much more, dive into that, and then just kind of continued to go to grad school to become a marriage and family therapist. And then got further trainings in complex trauma, CPTSD, because I was so interested in that. The more that I learned, the more that I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. And so just continued down that road. And so now I have my own practice in Indy and I specialize in complex trauma and CPTSD. So that's the Cliff Notes version.
Thank you for sharing all that because it's hard to share your own story over and over and over to people while you're also a therapist.
Yes.
And it also gives people permission to say, oh, that me too. Oh, that gives me permission to tell my story. You use the word spiritual bypassing. Love the term. That was coined. I cannot remember who coined the term. Do you remember who coined the term?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Absolutely
I studied
none.
this a while ago when it first came out. And I was like, I just love the term because it's not well known. Can you define it for folks? Because so many people might be like, now, what does that mean?
Yes, absolutely. There's all different kinds of ways that it can show up. But essentially, it's basically using a lot of spiritual language, a lot of spiritual terminology to just ignore and bypass the trauma that you've experienced, the things that you've experienced. And the way that I was spiritual bypassing was through Christianity. I had moved and I became a born again Christian, and it was all about the Christian terminology of like, I'm born again, I'm healed, Jesus has saved me, Jesus has healed me. And I've talked about this before. All of that was very healing in different ways and in some ways harmful. But the primary problem with it was that I wasn't acknowledging what had happened to me. And I wasn't acknowledging how those patterns still live in my body. And we might see spiritual bypassing. We see it a lot nowadays. I feel like not even just in the Christian faith, but in so many different ways. I've heard of A Course in Miracles. Now, I don't want to go off about any of this because I don't know it in depth, but I see it a lot in yoga teachers. And I know that you're a yoga teacher too. And so I'm curious what your take on that is. But just kind of everything that happened to me was for a reason and it made me a better human and all of these things, which I think there is such thing as post-traumatic growth. However, I also think it's so important to acknowledge the harm that has happened to us and how it affected us. And that it's not as easy as just saying we're healed, that sometimes, not sometimes, these patterns live inside of us. And when we experience a safe attachment, when we experience deep relationships and our trauma comes back up, it's okay to acknowledge it. And it's okay to say, this hurt. And I feel like spiritual bypassing is kind of yeah, let's not talk about that. That's in the past. Let's move forward. That's over and done with. And it almost shames people sometimes for having these issues. Like maybe there's evil at work. Maybe you're giving too much space for the enemy, right? Coming from the Christian faith, that was something that I would hear a lot. Instead of it being like, oh, yeah, all of that happened to you? Of course it still affects you, right? So I would say that that's how I would define it. I'm curious what you think about that, though.
I do not teach yoga, by the way, but I did get my instructor to get back into my body. Like it was a real important to me to connect to my body and
Yeah.
really notice instead of detaching from it or just kind of hustle bustle, achievement, success, perfectionism, all those things. It was
Mhm.
to slow down, reconnect. Part of EMDRs we love. Got EMDR. I'm an OG
Mhm.
EMDR therapist, like way back in the day. That was important. That was like a pioneering. I know Dr. Basil Vanderkolk pioneered it also with his book, Peter Levine. I mean, we've got so many, Stephen Porges, but the body is imperative to your point, to the healing process. So that's what led me to do it. I was like, I want
Mhm.
to really reconnect to my body. And spiritual bypassing, I see it all the time. And people are well intended. I want to say that it's a
Ooh,
well
yes.
intention that
Mhm.
we feel like we're trying to help somebody. So we give somebody scripture, which can be helpful. I'm not saying it's
Mhm.
not.
Mhm.
And there's an and in both. What are you feeling? How did that impact you? How has that shaped you? What happened to you in the past? Like, how has that
Absolutely.
impacted your relationships? How has it impacted your shame and how you feel? I think we've kind of skip over that, the
Yeah.
impact it's had. And to your point.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes. And I think the scripture piece, like God is in control, like everything happens for a reason, all of those things in some ways for me were harmful because it was like, oh, everything happens for a reason. So I was abused for a reason. So I ended up with these parents for a reason. In some way, that felt invalidating. And I think a lot of spiritual bypassing, unfortunately, because I think you're totally right. I think it is really well intentioned, I think is very invalidating. And especially from people who have come from circumstances that aren't similar to what you've come from and don't really understand where you're coming from. I think that that's also extremely harmful. So, yes. And it's funny because I actually almost got my yoga teaching certificate as well. I almost finished it, but I couldn't because there was a conflict with another class in grad school. But I loved yoga too because it got me back into my body. But I do see that nowadays, just online and stuff, there's a lot of spiritual bypassing in that community. Like it's not really spiritual bypassing, but I guess in some way, even in this like nervous system regulation sense, right? We're so obsessed with like, just like tap it out. Like it's fine. Just regulate, regulate, regulate. And it's almost now it's become emotional bypassing. It's kind of like we just need to regulate our nervous system. And it's also so important to acknowledge your nervous system's dysregulated for a reason. And what emotions do you need to let out and release instead of suppressing and trying to regulate out?
Oh, I am a firm believer in that. Always have been. Just knowing like we have emotions for a reason. And so we can't just compartmentalize it to one thing or another. So, like to your point,
Exactly.
it's not just the nervous system. We have our emotions that play a role in the nervous system.
Absolutely.
Don't look at the whole picture. I think bypassing cuts off parts of, like it cuts off parts of what we feel. It can cut off body, it can cut off
Mhm.
thoughts we might even have, right?
Oh,
Just change your
yes.
thoughts and then you'll be
Mhm.
healed. And it's like,
Oh,
wait a
that's so
minute.
true.
Why do I still feel like crap? Why do I still feel like I'm not good enough?
Yes. And with complex trauma, where I explained it to someone else, I think it was another podcast I was on, like it is embedded into us. Like it is threaded into the fabrics of who we are. It is not just one incident of what happened. So if you end up going to see a therapist and you've had complex trauma that has deeply impacted and become in so many ways your sense of self, and your therapist is like, just change your thought pattern. Oh my goodness. The harm that is done there, right? Like, just say these affirmations in the mirror and you're going to feel so much better. And actually, no, it's not going to help you feel better because the complex traumas in your body and your negative thoughts and everything have been programmed inside of you since you were so young. And so that's a big part of the work that I do with clients who are coming from other places and they're just like, I don't know why I've done talk therapy for years and it hasn't worked for me. Something must be wrong with me. And it's like, no, it's what happened to you.
Yeah, it's the truth. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the truth. And it can take people want drive-through therapy. They're like, Starbucks supersize me. And I'm like, yeah, no, this is going to take more than a few sessions, typically.
Oh. Exactly.
Especially
Yes.
for complex trauma. I mean, we're doing inner child work, we're doing in utero work. I mean, this is deep stuff. And people are like, what? That sounds really out there. I'm like, no, what happened in the womb impacts you today. Like you are being
Absolutely.
developed and
Absolutely.
formed, and all of that impacts your nervous system and how you feel, even the days after you were born. I mean, if you've had any medical traumas, I mean, those live in the body.
Yeah, that was the other thing that I didn't even know about was medical trauma. And then figuring this all out on my own journey has just been instrumental to the way that I work with my clients. Oh, excuse me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like, and my content creation, even. Like, I feel like everybody needs to know this stuff. When I have this aha moment and I learn something about my own healing journey, about my own self, I'm like, I need to share this with the world so that they can understand this too. And so many people are like, I've been to therapy for years and I never heard it like this, or I never saw it this way. And so that is also so important because I feel like more people need to understand this.
I agree. So you were saying like you got married and all your
Yes, yes,
attachment, your
yes.
disorganized attachment came into play because we love
Mm-hmm.
attachment work, which goes
Mm-hmm.
back to in utero, and it goes back to bonding with mom, your primary caregiver, whoever that person is.
Yes.
Here's where all the things come to the surface. Everybody's like, well, I was fine. I was doing great until I
Mhm.
got into a relationship or until I became a parent. So let's talk about that. Like you got married or you got into a relationship and
Yes.
all this stuff starts to get activated and mirrored back to you.
Yes. As you're like looking at me, I'm like, it's so fun. But it's such a good story. It really is. It's so meaty. And so, yeah, so first it was with my husband. And remember, I was like in this spiritual bypassing phase and very like in this born again Christian phase. And I hate to say phase like that, but it's just I've done so much deconstruction through this, through the healing journey and all of that, that has led me to such a different place. And like I said, there was a lot of healing that came with that. But part of that was just like me and my husband had never lived together before we were married. This was my first serious relationship ever. Like I had been in relationships in the past, but never anyone I was even remotely close to being in love with because I was so guarded that it was like I would date someone for a few months. And as soon as they started to figure out something, it would be like, oh, bye. And
Sure. You're
so
like, and we're done.
yeah, so I would always have like really close male friends, and I felt really safe in that way. Like, oh, I can have this masculine energy in my life in a way that's not romantic. But when my husband and I met, we became instantly like we had amazing conversations. We became really close friends right away. And then we were also like insanely attracted to each other. So it was like this blend of all of these things coming into play that were so great and catastrophic in a lot of ways for my trauma. It was like all of a sudden I had lived so well and healed so well without having any kind of romantic relationship whatsoever. It was like, I'm good. Oh, wait, I'm totally not. So once it really didn't even start because even dating and everything, it was great because we were also long distance, which was amazing. Like it was like, oh, you're 3 states away. I love this. I see you like once every couple months. And so it wasn't really till we were like in the same apartment. And then it was like, oh, you're always here. And my husband is very loving, very romantic, very like, I want to be with you all the time. And I was just very much like, okay, I need space. Like, this is too much. He really got a taste of like, and this sounds awful because I work with so many people who struggle with this. And I think a lot of people think it is intentional or we're playing games or something, right? But it's like feeling so close with someone and then also wanting them to just like get away from you. And that was the feeling that I had towards him. And so that's where I first started seeing it coming up. And it kind of also was this like gut intuition, like something's going to go horribly wrong. But I know now to be emotional flashbacks when we are in a really close relationship. What if he leaves me? What if he's cheating on me? Like all of these thoughts were always inside of me. And I would just pull away from him at first instead of communicating with him. And once I would communicate with him and we'd talk it through, it would be like, okay, I feel safe again, but it would just still regularly come up. So that's kind of where I first started noticing those deep attachment wounds, but I didn't even compute it to be because of my trauma or anything. Even though my dad had left when I was young, he was a sexual predator. Finding all of that out as such a young child, of course, like I didn't trust anybody at all. And then having a mom who was very physically and emotionally abusive and alcoholic. And then she also had been married several different times. And two of her husbands, or no, I'm like, how many husbands? She had a lot of husbands, but I think three of them died from really suddenly, like out of the blue. And so it was like so many attachment wounds. I had learned for so long, it had been programmed inside of me to not trust men. Men are useless. And when you are in a relationship, then you still can't trust them because they're probably going to leave you. So you either got to leave them before they leave you, or they're going to do something like cheat on you, or they're just not good people. So I had this bias towards men in general. So it really just led to a lot of like mistrust of my husband. And I had to do a lot of work around that.
Yeah. Isn't it
Yeah.
interesting how we're both licensed marriage and family therapists? There's no coincidences. I took my husband 2 months into dating and I'm like, we're going to premarital counseling. No joke. And he's like, okay. He had no idea what he was signing up for. But this is what we had to get all the childhood stuff out. I
Yes.
mean, the trust issues, the broke it. You didn't know if you could count on anybody. You certainly couldn't. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
sure. There's no one reliable that I can count on, right?
Yep.
And now I'm going to get married and rely on this person and count on this consistent person. And you're like,
Yeah.
that's a foreign concept.
Exactly. And no way. Like I was just kind of like, okay, I love you. I trust you. There's still a part of me that's like that. Like I still have to do work around that because it still comes up for me. So that's the other thing that I like try to explain with clients. Like I don't want them to feel doomed. Like, oh my gosh, you're just going to be on this journey forever. But just that like it still does come up and that's okay. There's space for that because where I would go is like, it's over. Like, I'm never going to be able to trust. I'm never going to be able to. And what I know now is that was really me in that dorsal vagal shutdown, my nervous system just being so scared and feeling so threatened and just being like, no, like it's never going to work. You're never going to feel safe in this relationship.
Which is really a protector part, that part that says you're never going to feel safe. Like you got to protect yourself, girl. Someone's going to hurt you. Like that is such a big part, understandably so.
Yeah, which is another part of the work that I'm sure you do with clients too, is just being able to tell that part, thank you so much for looking out for me. And thank you so much for taking care of me. And I need you to just take a seat and just relax for a minute. I remember talking to a protector part one time with my therapist at the time. And she was just like, what does that part want to say? And she was just like, I'm just so tired. I am so tired. And my therapist was like, does she want to just rest for a bit? She was like, yeah, I just want to rest for a bit because it is so exhausting being that protected all the time.
Yes. I mean, your nervous system's just constantly hypervigilant.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you noticed it come out, your trauma surfaced when you got married. On your social, I know you've talked about having kids because that also, but you had this idea, okay, if you come from trauma, that this is what it should look like based on whatever we've seen out there in a movie, on the internet, like in Christian world, however you want to frame it, that this is the perfect marriage, how you are a perfect partner or wife or insert whatever.
Thank you so much for naming that. Yes, because that was a big part of it. Because so much of me was like, my life growing up was like this. I want to be this stay-at-home mom. I want to be Betty frickin' Crocker. I want to cook meals for my husband who was in the military at the time. This is so funny because it was so like, I was really like, yes, I had gotten like my 1950s dresses that I loved to wear. And I want to cook him dinner all the time. And I loved that. But I did. I had this idea of what I was really doing was like, it was almost like this other part of me, like, Susie homemaker, I can't work. I'm going to be the perfect wife. I'm going to be the perfect mom. I'm going to have dinner on the table right at this time. I'm going to cook from scratch. No hamburger helper for us because my mom like always made hamburger helper. She was like a single mom. I mean, say she was a single mom, but she was married several different times. But it was just like, that's what I picture her as. She was like a drowning single mom, like all the time. It was like everything was paycheck to paycheck. Nobody was there when we needed them. So I was like, I'm going to be this stay-at-home mom who is there for her kids through everything. I'm going to be perfect. I'm going to be the perfect mom, perfect wife, and just really like what I imagined the perfect family to be like. But I always saw in churches and stuff like, yes, that's going to be me and my family. And when all this attachment stuff started coming up, it was like, oh, what's happening? And then when I had my first kid, he was so awesome. Of course, I say he's so awesome. That sounds like so generic. He was amazing, this little tiny being. And I loved him with everything I had. Like this was the most different type of love I've ever experienced. And I love my husband. I do. I love him so much. But my kids, when I had them, I felt so much love that it scared me because I was just like, something bad is going to happen. Like,
Mm.
I cannot love something this much. Like, I am not capable of taking care of this child. And this is coming from somebody who I was a nanny since the time I was like in sixth grade. I would take care of babies. I've always loved babies. I've always wanted children, other than like for the brief time when I was really sucked into the black hole of my trauma. I had always longed for a baby. And when I felt that love, it was so, so scary to me. And that's another part that I talk about a lot in my content creation and with my clients, because nobody talked about that. Like, nobody talked about, hey, when you have a lot of trauma, you're going to want things a certain way. You're going to have this idea of what the perfect family looks like. And your trauma is going to be triggered. And it's going to be extremely hard to navigate. And you're not going to know how to be the right parent. You're not going to know how to deal with your child crying incessantly. I felt like everything with my son scared me. I was all of the sudden, once again, like in this catastrophic state. Like, everything was a catastrophe. He spit up too much. Oh my gosh, we need to go take him to the emergency room right now. I became a child again because I was so triggered. I was acting like a child. I was pulling from every outside resource I could find. I was reading every parenting book. I was taking advice from anybody who would give me advice. And there's so much advice out there. And none of it focused on what's happening inside of you. How can you tend to what's happening inside of you? Everything was be with your child all the time, breastfeed no matter what. Anything other than breastfeeding is horrible for the baby. So I was also like, my son was born in the real like attachment parenting phase where it was like, you need to wear your child all the time. If your child's upset, it's because something you're doing and you need to be able to connect to him more. So all of that was so much more dysregulating to me because here I was, I've got this parenting thing down. I'm going to be the best mom. I'm going to be so much better than my parents were. I'm going to give this child a perfect life. And I also had no idea how to tend to my own emotions, how to tend to what was happening inside of me. I just was like, this is what I have to do because if I don't do this, I'm going to screw my kid up, which was just made me a worse mom in the long run, made me a more dysregulated mom. So yes, so all of those things kind of started to come up after having him.
We're always healing. Let me just say
Mhm.
that up front, like you said. And there's no finish line. There's invitations all the time for us. So talk to us about what you've learned on your healing journey thus far and what's been helpful and what's not been helpful.
So now I'm trying to think of the cliff notes of this because there's been
There's
so
so much.
much.
It's
And
let's
that's what
just
I
take the
tried to.
top three things
Ah,
that you've, 'cause there's so much we do and learned. As therapists, we're like, let me read that, let me do that, let me listen to this. And so going into parenthood, I mean, these expectations we have for ourselves that we're going to be create a secure attachment with our child. That's our goal.
Yes. And I just want to name too, because my journey was so backwards. Like, I wasn't a therapist when I had a kid. So I also had no idea, but I was still reading all of the books. But none of the books told me about how my own personal trauma and how having complex trauma would affect the way that I showed up.
Mm.
So I think the most important pieces of my healing journey, I needed to know what was happening inside of me. As soon as I understood your body is dysregulated because, and I'm getting emotional talking about this, relationships were never safe for you. Childhood was never safe for you. And you're terrified that you're going to do something that's going to cause the same thing to happen for your child. And what I needed to know was that those were parts trying to protect me and that it all made so much sense. Like, how would you know how to be a parent? Like, how would you know how to respond to your child? How would you know how to deal with things like discipline and things like nurturing and attunement? How would you know any of that? So that's what I try to give a lot of in my content creation. And that's what I try to explain to my clients who are complex trauma survivors with high ACEs. How would you know? And I remember saying one time, if you were trying to build a hutch and you were trying to follow these would you just go and grab the hutch? No, not try to follow the directions. I was like, would you just go and take the hutch and have all of these parts and screws and everything and try to put it together the best you could? That's essentially what you're trying to do with parenting. Like, you're saying you want to see this beautiful hutch, but you have no idea how to build that hutch. You need to find some instructions, right? And instructions you find have to be more focused on, not more, but I feel like they have to have a focus on what's happening inside of you internally. I feel like parenting advice is starting to tune into that a lot more now, but it hasn't been. It's very saturated with you need to remain calm for your kid, validate their emotions. You need to be able to give them a secure attachment, but there's no one sitting there and saying like, of course you would feel this way. Of course you're exhausted. Why don't you go take a rest? So I think that is a big thing, like learning how my trauma impacted me and how what impacts my body and the things that come up with my kids, like my triggers around them, the things that happen with them, my fears around them, even my anxieties around them. And then the next thing would be, so being able to understand how my trauma impacted me. The second thing was being able to tune into myself and my own internal needs, because dissociation is a really big thing that happens for trauma survivors. And that is like that. I'm not in my body. I'm just powering through. And so even with grad school and everything, I was pregnant with my third child in grad school. I finished my grad school program in record time and I graduated during COVID. I had my third son and was trying to start my practice like as a resident. And also the whole world had shut down. My husband had got deployed and everything. That whole time, I was just like not listening to myself, not giving myself rest, just powering through, powering through, powering through. So I feel like being able to stop and like listen to my body and just give it permission and attune to my own feelings. Oh my gosh, this is exhausting. You need to rest, like being able to nurture myself and give myself love, which did not come naturally at all and does not come naturally to a lot of complex trauma survivors. So that would be the second thing, being able to like listen and tune in internally, getting reconnected with my body, as you had mentioned. And then the third part of my healing journey that I feel like has just been so crucial for me is being in community with other survivors. In my content creation has been a huge thing because I was so vulnerable in that. And what I found is like so many people feel this way. So many people. And it actually felt healing for me. It was like, oh, I'm not afraid. There's nothing weird about this. In fact, it happens to so many people and so many people feel exactly like this. And so in community in that way, but also in community, just like actually in real life with other moms who are experiencing the same symptoms, who we can laugh about with things like, oh, guess what I did? Oh my gosh, guess what I had to repair for with my kid the other day? Yeah, I did this, right? And being able to laugh about that, it's huge. Just being able to say, yeah, we're going to screw up sometimes, and that's totally okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. You're still a good mom. You're still a good parent.
It's true.
So,
Because we're always afraid. I don't want to end up like my mom. I hear that so many times. Or the fear of being like your child feeling the way you do about your own parent in particular, that you don't want your child to feel that way about you as a parent. I hear
yeah,
that all the time. I think that's a natural fear for so many of us.
it's so natural. It's so triggering too when your kid does come to you and they are saying stuff to you that's hard to hear because you're like, after everything I've done to not be that way, and you have the nerve to tell me, and I still have to work through that with my
Oh,
therapist. She's like, kind of sounds like you're trying to be the perfect parent again. Like you're thinking you're going to get through this without ever doing something that's going to let them down. And I'm like, damn it, you're right.
I
Like,
know.
and I have to
Try
go back
so
to my son and I
hard.
have to go like, I shut down when you said that. And it did shut me down and it made me feel mad and it made me feel angry. And I wasn't able to listen to you. And I am so sorry about that because you have a right to feel that way. And then we just talk through it. And then it's like, you realize that your connection to your child is so much deeper than those moments. It's
Yes.
like, we're all human. He screws up. I screw up. We all screw up. And we just talk about it together and just be like, yeah, that was horrible. I'm sorry I did that. For me, shutting down is like a really big one that I go into and I just like shut down. And so being able to come back and be like, yeah, I'm so sorry that I did that. I shouldn't have shut down like that.
It's the
And it
greatest
has
gift.
nothing to do with you. Oh, it really is.
Repair
There's so
work.
much
I
space.
love repair work because I'm like, we can just be humans and then we can do some reflection, own our stuff, apologize in a sincere way without rationalizing it. The freedom in that is so big.
Yes.
Okay, we're so close on time and there's so much I want to ask you. The last question I want to say is what books have been the most life-changing for you?
Okay, so the few that I've read that I felt like really impacted me in the realm of CPTSD and complex trauma is What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. Have you read that one?
No, you're the first person to mention it.
It's so
What My Bones
good.
Know. You're the first person to ever mention this book.
It's so good. And she's actually from where I grew up. She's from San Jose. And so that really was fun to read about. I was like, oh my gosh, you're from San Jose too. She talked about like Happy Hollow and stuff. So it's really good because just from like a perspective that's not white, I felt that was also very good to read, to hear another perspective of it. Cause I feel like a lot, the authors out there about trauma and stuff are white authors. So that was really helpful. So eye-opening. She tells her story and then she also tells her process of healing, and it's so good. So,
Oh,
so
good.
good.
Okay, What My Bones Know. All right.
Yes.
This is the first. So I love
Yes.
that.
And then Pete Walker, his book, Complex Trauma from Surviving to Thriving. I think it's Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. Huge eye-opener. Oh my gosh. Everything reading that book, I was just like, oh, yep, yep, yep. Spot on. And it is kind of, I tell people, like, it is kind of hard to read through. I wouldn't try to read through the whole thing all at once.
It's
Just kind of
cumbersome.
skipping around
Yeah,
chapters. And same thing with Body Keeps the Score. Body Keeps the Score is good, but once again, it's like one of those books that is just kind of like, it's intense and it's a lot to take in.
it is.
One that was an easy read that I loved was Awakening the Tiger by Peter Levine. That was really good about somatic experiencing. But there are some stories in there that are a little traumatizing to read. Sometimes it's a little bit shocking. So if you're in any kind of crisis state, wouldn't recommend reading that book.
Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you feel like was important?
I thought that was all good. It's always hard for me. I feel like I black out a little bit when I'm doing a podcast.
I do
Like,
too. I'm like, wait, what did I say? What? I don't even remember what we talked about.
yes, and it's like I'm talking about all of these things that can be putting my nervous system into fight or flight a little bit, like I'm just because I'm talking
Sure.
about things that are vulnerable. And so then I'm like, what did I say? I sounded horrible. I was all jumbled. And then once I listened to it back, I'm like, oh no, that was good. I feel like we pretty much summed up everything. It feels like it's put together well in a place that feels good. How about you? What do you think?
100%. I think you covered so much ground. And what I love about you is your vulnerability and your willingness. You can tell you've worked on your protector parts because to be able to do this, I mean, that takes a lot because the protector parts are still there. That's what I tell people. It's not like they just disappear. They get less, maybe they get less protective. Like they don't feel like you need, because your self is coming forward to protect you or to take care of you, to nurture you. And so I just want to say thank you for your vulnerability because I think that's why you built your social media to the place you have, is because you're sharing of yourself. That takes a lot of work, especially in the field that we're in. I mean, because we hear so much people's stories and for you to tell your own, I just want to say thank you. And that's a gift that you're changing the world with. And I appreciate you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so
for
much.
being here. I
appreciate that.
Lovely to have our conversation today.
Thank you so much. I really genuinely appreciate you saying that. I really am thankful that we had this conversation.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, KRISTEN, Boyce, BOICE.com. Thanks and have a great day.